Steven Seagal wasn't looking for attention that day. He pulled his car into a small roadside diner just outside the city, the kind of place truck drivers stop for coffee and bikers refuel before hitting the highway again. The sun was low, the parking lot half full, and the air smelled like gasoline and fried food. Steven stepped out calmly, dressed simply. No entourage. No cameras. Just a quiet man going about his day. That's when the sound hit. Engines. Loud. Aggressive. Deliberate. A group of bikers rolled in together, their motorcycles growling as they parked diagonally across several spaces, clearly wanting to be noticed. Leather jackets, heavy boots, loud laughter. The kind of presence that fills a place before the people even walk inside. One of them brushed past Steven's shoulder a little too hard. No apology. Steven stopped and turned slowly. The biker looked back with a smirk, eyes scanning Steven up and down, his age, his calm face, his silence. "Watch where you're going, old man," the biker muttered. Steven didn't react. He simply adjusted his jacket and continued walking toward the diner. That's when the laughter started behind him. This is how most conflicts begin in real life. Not with fists, but with disrespect. One side testing boundaries, hoping the other will shrink. Inside the diner, a few heads turned. People sensed something was off. Steven took a seat near the window, his posture relaxed, his breathing slow, almost meditative. The bikers followed him in. One of them leaned against the counter, watching Steven closely, like a predator waiting to see if prey would panic. Steven didn't. "Where are you watching this from right now? Comment your country and city below. Because situations like this don't belong to one place, they happen everywhere." The biker whispered something to his group, and they laughed again. What they didn't know was that the quiet man they were mocking was a black belt in karate, trained not just to fight, but to control himself when others couldn't. And that calm, it wasn't fear, it was discipline. And the bikers were about to make one very big mistake. The bell above the diner door rang again as the bikers fully entered. Their presence changed the room instantly. Conversations softened. Forks paused mid-air. A waitress glanced up, sensing tension before she understood it. The bikers didn't rush, they spread out, claiming space the way confident troublemakers always do. One stood near the door. Another leaned against the counter. Two more slid into a booth behind Steven. Steven felt them before he looked at them. Not fear, awareness. Years of discipline had trained his body to notice shifts in energy. Footsteps slowing, voices lowering, intent sharpening. He remained seated, eyes forward, calmly stirring his coffee. "Real quiet type, huh?" one biker said from behind him. Steven didn't turn. Another biker laughed. "Probably scared." Still nothing. The biker closest to him pulled out a chair and sat down without asking, invading Steven's personal space. He smelled of leather and engine oil. "You didn't apologize outside," the biker said. "That usually means something." Steven finally turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge him. "I didn't do anything wrong," Steven replied calmly. The biker raised an eyebrow. "You telling me what's right and wrong now?" Steven's voice stayed even. "I'm telling you I don't want trouble." That answer confused them. Bullies expect anger. They expect fear. They don't know what to do with calm. When someone is looking for a fight, peace feels like disrespect. Because it denies them the reaction they crave. One biker snorted. "Hear that? He thinks he's in control." The group laughed again, louder this time. Steven took a slow sip of coffee, then placed the cup down carefully. His hands were steady, not clenched, not tense. Across the diner, a man quietly took out his phone. Then another. Not to film Steven, but to film what might happen. The biker leaned closer. "You always this calm, or you just pretending?" Steven met his eyes fully now. "I'm calm because I choose to be." The biker blinked, caught off guard by the confidence behind such a simple sentence. "Oh, you think staying calm in a tense situation makes things better? Or does it sometimes make aggressive people angrier? Comment better or angrier." The biker scoffed and stood up suddenly, pushing his chair back loudly so it scraped across the floor. "Relax," he said sarcastically. "We're just talking." Stephen nodded once. Then let's keep it that way. That's when another biker noticed something. Stephen's posture. Relaxed shoulders. Straight spine. Balanced stance, even while seated. Not sloppy. Not defensive. Trained. He leaned toward his friend and muttered, "Something's off about this guy." The leader glanced back at Stephen again, narrowing his eyes. "You military or something?" he asked. Stephen shook his head. "No." "Cop?" "No." "Then what?" Stephen paused for half a second. "Just someone who values respect." The diner went quiet again. True strength doesn't announce itself. It waits. And that waiting makes insecure people nervous. The biker laughed to cover his discomfort. "Respect is earned." Stephen stood up slowly now. Not abruptly, not aggressively. "I agree," he said. "That's why I'm giving you a chance." That sentence landed harder than any insult. If you were one of the bikers, would you walk away now? Or would your ego push you to keep going? The leader clenched his jaw. Because at that moment, he had a choice. And the wrong one would change everything. Part 3 is where the line gets crossed. The diner felt smaller now. Not because more people had entered, but because the air itself had thickened. Stephen stood quietly beside his table, hands relaxed at his sides. He wasn't squared up. He wasn't aggressive. But he also wasn't backing away. The biker leader stared at him, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. "You giving me a chance?" he repeated. "You think you're better than us?" Stephen shook his head slowly. "No. I think we're all responsible for how this ends." That answer irritated him more than an insult ever could. One of the bikers laughed nervously. "Man, this guy talks like a movie character." Another added, "Yeah, like he's rehearsed." Stephen didn't respond. He didn't need to. The leader stepped closer, close enough that Stephen could feel his breath. "You don't get to talk to me like that," the biker said. Stephen met his eyes. Then stepped back. The room went silent. That was it. That was the moment. The biker shoved Stephen's chest with his palm, not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to send a message. Gasps echoed through the diner. A woman near the counter covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh no!" Stephen took one step back, absorbing the force, and then stopped. He didn't stumble. He didn't retaliate. He simply looked at the hand that had touched him, then back at the man attached to it. "Don't do that again," Stephen said quietly. "No shouting. No threats. Just a boundary. This is the exact point where most situations explode. Ego has been challenged. Pride is on the line. And now, someone has crossed from words into physical space." The biker laughed, loud, forced, insecure. "Or what?" he said. Stephen didn't answer immediately. He glanced around the diner. At the waitress gripping the counter. At the old man frozen mid-bite. At the phones now fully raised, recording everything. Then he looked back at the biker. "Or this stops being a conversation," Stephen said. The biker's smile faded. "Be honest, what would you do right now? If someone puts hands on you first, is walking away still the right move? Comment walk away or stand your ground, and why?" The biker shoved him again. Harder this time. That's when Stephen moved. Not forward. Not aggressively. He shifted his stance, just slightly, feet adjusting, weight settling evenly. Most people wouldn't notice it. But anyone trained would. The biker raised his fist, emboldened now by the lack of reaction. "You ain't so calm now, are you?" he sneered. Stephen's voice remained steady. "I'm calmer than you think." One of the bikers in the back suddenly spoke up. "Hey, man, maybe that's enough." The leader shot him a look. "Stay out of it." Notice something important here. The most dangerous moment isn't when everyone wants violence. It's when one person refuses to stop. Stephen raised his hands slightly, palms open. Not surrender. Control. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "And I don't want you to hurt anyone else." The biker scoffed. "You think you could hurt me?" Stephen paused. "I know I could," he said calmly. "And that's why I'm asking you to walk away." That sentence landed like a weight. The diner went dead quiet. Even the bikers felt it. Because that wasn't arrogance. That was certainty, as true confidence loud, or quiet like this. Have you ever met someone who scared you without raising their voice? The leader clenched his fists. You could see the battle inside him. Logic versus ego. Backing down would mean losing face. But pushing forward? Something about Stephen told him that would be a mistake. The biker took a step back. Then stopped. Then stepped forward again. You don't scare me, he said, trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Stephen nodded once. That's okay. The biker swung. Not a clean punch. Not a trained strike. Just raw anger. Stephen's body reacted before the fist fully extended. A pivot. A deflection. A movement so fast and controlled that most people didn't process it until it was over. The biker stumbled forward, off balance, crashing into a table. Stephen released him immediately. No follow-up. No extra damage. The message had been delivered. The diner erupted in shocked gasps. Phones shook as people tried to keep filming. Stephen stepped back, hands open again. Enough, he said. This is the difference between fighting and mastery. One is driven by anger. The other ends danger as quickly as possible. The bikers froze. They finally understood something important. This wasn't an old man they were bullying. This was a trained black belt. A man who had been holding back the entire time. And now the room was waiting to see what they would do next. Because part 4 is where realization turns into fear. The diner was silent. Not the comfortable kind. The heavy, suspended kind. The biker who had just been redirected into the table pushed himself up slowly, eyes wide, breathing uneven. He looked less angry now, and more confused. What the hell was that? Someone muttered. Stephen stood exactly where he was, shoulders relaxed, hands open at his sides. He hadn't followed up. He hadn't threatened anyone. He hadn't even raised his voice. That disturbed them more than violence ever could. The biker leader stared at Stephen, trying to recalibrate everything he thought he knew. The image in his head, an old man who could be intimidated, no longer matched reality. You, he started, then stopped. Stephen met his eyes calmly. You're okay, Stephen said to the biker who stumbled. Take a breath. That sentence changed the energy. He wasn't mocking. He wasn't challenging. He was checking on him. This is where fear really begins. Not when someone hurts you, but when they could have, and chose not to. The biker who had been knocked off balance nodded slowly, still stunned. Another biker stepped back unconsciously, creating space. Then another. People noticed. Whispers spread through the diner. That wasn't luck. He didn't even try. That was trained. A man near the counter leaned toward his friend. That guy knows exactly what he's doing. Stephen shifted slightly, giving the group more room, not less. I don't want this to go any further, he said. No one here does. The biker leader clenched his jaw. You think you embarrassed me, he snapped, though the fire behind his words was weaker now. Stephen shook his head. No. I think you're embarrassed because people are watching. That landed. Phones were still raised. Not aggressively, but attentively. Why do you think restraint feels more powerful than revenge? Have you ever seen someone win a situation by staying calm? The leader glanced around. He could feel it now. The room wasn't on his side anymore. Not because Stephen attacked him, but because Stephen showed control. One of the bikers spoke up, voice quieter than before. Man, let's just go. The leader shot him a look. You scared? The biker hesitated. I'm thinking. That answer mattered. Real dominance disappears the moment people stop thinking for themselves. And right now, they were thinking. Stephen took a step back, increasing the distance. You can leave, he said calmly. Nothing more needs to happen. The leader laughed, but it sounded hollow. You think you decide that? Stephen didn't respond immediately. He simply stood there, balanced, centered, completely present. That silence spoke louder than words. The leader exhaled sharply. "What are you, some kind of fighter?" he asked. Stephen nodded once. "Yes." The diner leaned in. "A black belt," Stephen added. "A long time ago." The biker swallowed. That explained everything. The posture. The timing. The precision. You think knowing how to fight makes situations more dangerous. Or actually safer because of self-control. The biker who had stumbled earlier looked at Stephen with a mix of embarrassment and respect. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Stephen nodded. "I know." The leader looked at his crew. For the first time, he wasn't leading them forward. He was calculating a way out. "You think you're better than us?" he asked one last time, softer now. Stephen shook his head. "No," he said. "I think I've been where you are." That caught them off guard. "I've been angry," Stephen continued. "I've let ego speak for me. And I've learned where that leads." Silence. Heavy. Honest. This is the moment conflict turns into reflection. When the fight isn't about strength anymore, but about choices. The leader finally stepped back. Not dramatically. Not proudly. But enough. "We're done," he muttered to his group. The bikers slowly backed away, eyes never fully leaving Stephen. No insults now. No laughter. Just caution. Stephen nodded once in acknowledgement. Not victory. Closure. As they reached the door, the leader paused. "You didn't have to humiliate me," he said. Stephen replied calmly. "I didn't." The door opened. Cold air rushed in. And just like that, they were gone. The diner exhaled as one. People lowered their phones. Stephen sat back down, picked up his coffee, and took a quiet sip. But everyone there knew something important had happened. Because strength had entered the room. And left without violence. Part 5 is where the lesson becomes clear, for everyone watching. The diner slowly came back to life. Plates clinked again. Someone let out a nervous laugh. A waitress finally exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath for minutes. Phones lowered, but no one stopped watching Stephen. Not because they were afraid anymore. Because they were curious. Stephen sat quietly at his table, exactly where he had been before everything happened. He didn't chase the bikers out. He didn't look proud. He didn't even look relieved. He looked normal. That confused people more than anything else. A man from the counter approached carefully. "You okay?" he asked. Stephen nodded. "Everyone is. That's what matters. This is something movies rarely show. After real tension, there's no dramatic music. Just silence and processing." The biker group was gone, but their energy still lingered, like a storm that had passed without rain. The biker who had stumbled earlier lingered near the door, helmet in hand. He looked back once more, hesitation written all over his face. "Hey," he said quietly. Stephen looked up. "I shouldn't have touched you," the biker admitted. "That was on me." Stephen studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you for saying that." No lecture. No, I told you so. Just acknowledgement. That moment mattered. The biker nodded once and walked out. The door closed. Something shifted in the room. How often do you see someone admit they were wrong and be met with calm instead of punishment? Do you think moments like this change people, or do they forget them later? A young man sitting a few tables away leaned toward his friend and whispered, "That was insane." Not the move. Not the deflection. The restraint. Stephen finished his coffee and stood up to leave. As he did, the waitress stopped him. "Sir," she said softly, "thank you." "For what?" Stephen asked. "For not turning this place into chaos." Stephen smiled faintly. "It didn't need to be. This is the part people misunderstand about martial arts. Training isn't about fighting more. It's about needing to fight less." As Stephen stepped outside, the sun had dipped lower. The parking lot was quieter now, almost peaceful. He paused for a moment, taking a slow breath. Inside, people were already replaying the footage on their phones. Not to glorify violence, but to understand what they had witnessed. A man standing nearby shook his head. "That guy could have hurt them." Another replied, "Yeah, but he didn't." That was the point. Which is harder, learning how to fight, or learning when not to? Tell us what you think. Stephen reached his car, unlocked it, and sat inside. Before starting the engine, he rested his hands on the steering wheel and closed his eyes briefly. Not out of stress. Out of discipline. True mastery is quiet. It doesn't need witnesses. And it doesn't need validation. The story would spread later. People would talk about the biker who flew into the table. They'd slow the clip down frame by frame. They'd argue about technique. But the real lesson wasn't in the movement. It was in everything before it. Stephen choosing calm over ego. Choosing restraint over dominance. Choosing to protect strangers from chaos. If you had Stephen's skills, would you trust yourself to show the same restraint? Why or why not? Stephen started the car and pulled away. No sirens. No shouting. No applause. Just a quiet man leaving a loud lesson behind. Because strength doesn't need to announce itself. And respect. It's always earned in silence. Stephen was already miles down the road when the first video was uploaded. Inside the diner, people replayed the clip over and over. Not just the moment where the biker lost balance, but everything around it. The calm voice. The open hands. The pause before movement. Someone said quietly, "That wasn't violence." Another replied, "That was control." By the time Stephen reached the highway, the video had a caption. "Bikers tried the wrong man. Didn't know he was a black belt." Within hours, it was everywhere. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. Endless debates. This is what the internet does best and worst. It magnifies moments, sometimes without understanding them. Some people praised Stephen. Real strength. That's how a man should handle disrespect. Notice how he tried to walk away first. Others criticized him. He still used force. He could have left sooner. What if someone got hurt? Both sides argued passionately. And that mattered. Because the conversation wasn't about Stephen anymore. It was about self-control. You think moments like this should go viral? Or should some lessons stay offline? Tell us your opinion. Stephen didn't comment. He didn't repost the video. He didn't give interviews. He didn't defend himself. That silence frustrated some people and impressed others. A martial arts instructor shared the clip with his students, pausing it frame by frame. "Watch this," he said. "This is what discipline looks like." A psychologist stitched the video, pointing out how Stephen used de-escalation first. "This is a masterclass in emotional regulation," she said. "True influence doesn't come from shouting your version of the truth. It comes from letting people observe and decide." Meanwhile, the bikers were dealing with their own reality. One of them deleted his social media accounts entirely. Another privately messaged the diner owner to apologize. The leader never responded publicly, but those who knew him noticed something different. He was quieter, less reactive. Embarrassment had turned into reflection. You think being humbled publicly changes people for the better? Or just makes them more resentful? Stephen stopped that night at a quiet rest area. He stepped out of the car, stretching slowly, breathing in the cool air. No one recognized him there. And he preferred it that way. He sat on a bench, phone buzzing in his pocket. Messages from friends. From students. From people saying, "You handled that right." Stephen read them, then put the phone away. The hardest part of restraint isn't the moment itself. It's living with the knowledge that you could have done more, and choosing peace anyway. The next morning, the story reached international feeds. Headlines weren't dramatic. They were thoughtful. Calm beats chaos. Why this martial artist didn't escalate. Parents shared the clip with their kids. Teachers discussed it in classrooms. Comment sections turned into debates about masculinity, ego, and respect. What do you think real masculinity looks like today? Loud dominance or quiet confidence? Stephen never made a statement. But a quote attributed to him began circulating, one he'd shared years earlier with students. "The goal isn't to win fights. The goal is to make fighting unnecessary." That quote spread even faster than the video in a world addicted to reaction. Discipline feels radical. Days later, the diner owner put up a small sign near the counter. Respect is served here. No explanation. People who knew, knew. Stephen continued his life quietly. Training. Teaching. Practicing the same discipline that had carried him through that moment. No trophies. No applause. Just consistency. If you had that level of strength and control, would you trust yourself to use it wisely, every time? Because the real lesson wasn't about bikers, or diners, or even martial arts. It was about what happens after the moment passes, and who you choose to be when no one is watching. Part 7 is where everything comes together, and the final message becomes clear. A week later, the video still hadn't disappeared. It wasn't trending anymore, not in the loud, chaotic way, but it lingered. It lived in saved folders, shared messages, late-night conversations. The kind of clip people returned to when they needed perspective. Stephen never watched it again. For him, the moment had already passed. He was back in his routine, early mornings, quiet training, teaching students in a small dojo far from noise and headlines. The floor mats were worn. The walls were simple. No posters of glory. No reminders of fame. Just discipline. One of his younger students finally asked the question everyone else was thinking. "Sensei, why didn't you hit him when he pushed you?" Stephen tied his belt slowly before answering. "Because I didn't need to," he said. The student frowned. "But you could have." Stephen nodded. "That's why I didn't." This is the lesson most people miss. Power isn't proven by what you do. It's proven by what you choose not to do. Outside the dojo, the world kept arguing. Some people still insisted Stephen should have walked away sooner. Others believed he showed exactly the right amount of force. A few missed the point entirely and only talked about technique. But many, quietly, understood. They didn't comment. They didn't argue. They reflected. A father talked to his son about anger. A woman shared the story with her brother who struggled with control. A former biker watched the clip late at night and felt something uncomfortable and necessary. Has there ever been a moment in your life where you were proud of yourself for not reacting? What did that cost you, and what did it save? Stephen never reached out to the bikers. He didn't need closure from them. The real closure came from knowing the situation ended without sirens, without funerals, without regret. Not every victory looks like a win. Some look like everyone walking away alive. Months later, someone recognized Stephen at a quiet cafe. Worried, they whispered, "You're that guy from the diner video." Stephen smiled politely. "I'm just a guy who drinks coffee." The person hesitated. "That video helped me," they said. "I was angry all the time. Seeing you stay calm, it made me rethink things." Stephen nodded gently. Then it served its purpose. No autograph. No photo. Just a moment of shared understanding. You think real influence happens online? Or in quiet moments like this, person to person? The story slowly faded from feeds. But the lesson didn't. Because strength that depends on attention disappears when the spotlight moves on. Discipline doesn't. Anyone can learn how to hurt someone. Few learn how to stop themselves. That's the difference between power and mastery. Stephen ended that day the same way he ended most days, quietly. No applause. No validation. Just the calm certainty that he had lived according to his values. And that was enough. If you believe real strength is shown through restraint, type discipline in the comments. And if you believe respect is more powerful than fear, subscribe for more stories like this. Because the loudest people are rarely the strongest. And the strongest ones? They don't need to prove it.